Good morning. My name is Cindy Leitner, and I'm a member at large of your Board of Trustees. Welcome to the North Shore Unitarian Church, where our mission is to empower people to live with greater depth, meaning, and purpose. I may have said this before, but one thing that I really love about this congregation is its ability to laugh and have fun. Even a strong hint, dare I say, of mischief sometimes. We're a thoughtful bunch. We get involved in service to the community. We spend time deepening our faith, but we have a lot of fun doing so. We welcome you here today no matter your abilities, skin color or ethnicity, family configuration or how you experience the sacred, no matter who you love or how you make your living. We hope you will feel welcome here. If you'd like to learn a bit more about our community, we invite you to sign in with our contact information on the iPad that's out in the foyer, and to join us afterwards for coffee and conversation. You can ask anyone about our congregation, and the folks wearing greeter buttons are especially happy to chat with you. We are a busy congregation with lots of things going on. Be sure to check the announcements in your order of service, and I just want to point out a couple of quick ones. This morning, immediately after the service, we will be having our monthly drop-in conversation, UU 101. This is an informal meeting with Ariel Hunt Bronwyn, our connections coordinator. Ariel, where are you? She's over there. She's, in absentia. She's waiting. Okay, sorry, she's over there. She will be here for visitors and newcomers and anyone wishing to learn a little bit more about our faith tradition and our congregation. And if you'd like to chat, please wait for Ariel right here immediately after the service. Today is Soup Day, you might be able to smell, thanks to Barb Moore. Join us downstairs for soup, and the proceeds go to the church. And Barb needs help with cleanup if you can volunteer after that. And now we have a special announcement.
Good morning. I'm Jim Stevenson. I'm a member of the Ministerial Search Committee. This morning I have two quick announcements. First, the congregational survey is now active online for you to fill in. A link to the survey was in last Friday's announcements email. Just click on the link and answer the 31 questions. Most are multiple choice, and there are no wrong answers. In a few days, I will have printed copies for those of you who don't do online. You have until October 5th to complete the survey. If you're like me, you'll say, October 5th, that's lots of time. And then every other day you'll say, I must remember to do that survey. And then on October 6th you'll say, oops. Save yourself a lot of trouble and grief and do it, just do it today or tomorrow. Second, next Sunday in October 14th, the Ministerial Search Committee will hold town hall meetings right after the Sunday service. This is your best chance to participate in a discussion of what type of minister we seek and to offer guidance to the search committee. Thank you.
If you weren't here yesterday for the workshop, you're probably wondering who this is up here. I have the pleasure today. Yeah, that one. I have the pleasure today of introducing my friend and colleague, Stefan Jonasson. We worked together for many years as Unitarian Universalist Association field staff, and he went on to bigger and better things with the UUA as director of large congregations and then director of growth strategies. I went on to retirement. I promised Stefan I wouldn't share any incriminating or embarrassing stories, but he could likely dredge up a few. His work with the UUA involved lots of consulting about church growth, governance, vision, long-range planning, conflict management, leadership training, and generally how to be a healthy church. He's an ordained Unitarian Universalist minister living in Winnipeg, but I think his heart lies in Iceland. His name might have clued you into his Icelandic heritage. If you want to know anything about Iceland, just ask him, because he loves to share stories about Icelandic history and culture. In fact, he currently is the editor of a twice-monthly periodical serving the Icelandic community in all of North America. And he says it's the oldest ethnic periodical in North America, having been established in 1886. He has served on many organizations and boards and has received various distinguished awards, but I know him simply as a person of deep integrity, intelligence, humor, and compassion. We welcome him today and next week in the pulpit, and we also appreciate the chances that we get to pick his brains about dealing with change in our church and our vision for the future. If you missed the workshop yesterday, or you would enjoy the opportunity to spend more time asking Stefan questions or advice, we have another gathering with him on Tuesday evening here at church at 7 p.m. downstairs. Everyone is welcome to attend. A warm welcome to you, Stefan, from all of us gathered here.
Good morning. It is a delight to be with you here this morning. I have worshiped with you before, but never had the opportunity to, what would you say, worship at you. So I'm delighted to be here. The opening words are from Marge Piercy. I want to be with people who are submerged in the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who stand in the line and haul in their places, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but who move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world is as common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands and crumbles into dust. But the thing worth doing, well done, has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amphoras for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn, they are put in museums, but you know they were made to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real.
Yar, me hearties, 'tis a fine morning for lighting things on fire. Good morning, my name is Ryan Gunther. And in the choir, Allison is always reminding us not to overemphasize our R's so we don't sound like pirates. But this Wednesday is Talk Like a Pirate Day, and I am not one to let an opportunity slip by. Pirates, of course, were maritime gangs, the organized crime of their day, living off theft, extortion, and kidnapping. Everything they did, and in some cases their very existence, was a crime. A third were freed slaves from Africa, and many of the rest had been kidnapped or press-ganged into the British Navy, and if caught would be hung for desertion regardless of any other crimes they may commit. But despite their circumstances or justifications, they still tortured, raped, and murdered thousands of people. And despite that complicated history, today they've been reduced to a silly accent and a cliche Halloween costume. And so this morning I light this chalice in the knowledge that whatever we do in our lives, we have no control over how we will be remembered. We kindle this flame as a symbol of our gathering.
Somebody is in control. It's interesting. The chalice dedication reminds me of Iceland. Because in Iceland, the pirates are a political party, and they currently hold 6 of the 63 seats in Alþingi, the Icelandic parliament. And actually, they're committed to all good and decent things. They support, liberalization in all aspects of life. They introduced the legislation that removed blasphemy as a crime. And so some of my best friends are pirates. And as it happens, Icelanders also with their R's. Let's settle in for a moment of reflection as I read to you from E.B. White's mail. This is from a letter dated 30th of March, 1973, in North Brooklyn, Maine. The author, E.B. White, had received a despairing letter from one of his admirers. You may remember E.B. White as the author of Charlotte's Web and other great classics. He received a despairing letter, and he tried to send back a message that both acknowledged the despair and reflected a word of hope. And so he wrote, "Dear Mr. Nadeau, as long as there is one upright man, as long as there is one compassionate woman, the contagion may spread, and the scene is not desolate. Hope is the thing that is left to us in a bad time. I shall get up on Sunday morning and wind the clock as a contribution to order and steadfastness." Sailors have an expression about the weather. They say the weather is a great bluffer. I guess the same is true of our human society. Things can look dark. Then a break shows in the clouds and all is changed, sometimes rather suddenly. It is quite obvious that the human race has made a strange mess of life on this planet. But as a people, we probably harbor seeds of goodness that have lain for a long time waiting to sprout when the conditions are right. Humanity's curiosity, our relentlessness, our inventiveness, our ingenuity have led us into deep trouble. We can only hope that these same traits will enable us to claw our way out. So hang on to your hat. Hang on to your hope and wind the clock, for tomorrow is another day. Sincerely, E.B. White. Please join in a moment of silent reflection. There's a piece of time-honored advice that says you should seek to live one day at a time. Don't dwell on the past. The future will take care of itself, and there's no shortage of such folk proverbs, many of them doubtfully attributed to famous figures of the past, much like that meme on the internet that shows Abraham Lincoln saying, "Don't believe everything you read," on social media. These proverbs admonish us to approach time in one way or another, and each of them has a kernel of truth to them. Let's acknowledge it. Sometimes it is good advice if we just learn to live one day at a time. Other times it's very good for us not to dwell on the past, especially if the past leads us to bitterness and inactivity. And it is also true that sometimes the future will take care of itself, although the future rarely does so without our help. And so the proverbs we choose at any given moment are generally those that ameliorate our concerns at what is happening right now in our lives. There's nothing wrong with this. We all need comfort and reassurance from time to time, and sometimes we need just enough wisdom, even if it's only a half-truth, to make it through to the end of the day. Generally speaking, though, when I'm having a bad day, I don't really want to live one day at a time. I want today to be over in those moments. The sooner, the better. Now, when we're having a bad day, it is easy to despair in the present moment. And I do think it's good advice to savor the moment if we can, if we're not having a bad day, and not to worry so much about what's in the past or in the future. But living one day at a time simply has its obvious limitations. Living in the present moment can sometimes lead to recklessness. It sometimes leads to a lack of preparation for our own best interests in the future. Living one day at a time, in fact, can sometimes allow us to revert back to a different day and fixate on that one. So my advice to you, and I could end the sermon here, but I won't. My advice to you is to cherish the past, savor the present moment, and live into your best future. Whatever discouragement, pessimism, and despair there may be today is often a result of too great an absorption in the present, wrote George R. Dodson, a Unitarian minister from a century ago. The gloom due to the short sight is dissipated by the courage, hope, and faith that come with the longer view. The transition of winter into summer is never perfectly gradual and even. But these temporary returns of winter do not make us despair of the coming of the summer. The occasional relapse of an advancing civilization is as natural and inevitable as are the seasonal changes. Nevertheless, we are surely on our way to world organization, order, and peace. These were unusually optimistic words when you consider that he wrote them in 1917 on the eve of the United States joining the rest of the Allied nations of that era in entering the First World War. I have to tell you that when he wrote these optimistic and hopeful words, most people were despairing. Even Unitarians in Canada and the United States had joined the Chicken Little party, running around noting that the sky was falling. There was ample reason for discouragement, pessimism, and despair, and it was impossible for a reasonable person at the time to avoid feeling absorbed in the moment. The gloom was real, and it was hardly short-sighted to feel it. And while courage, hope, and faith were necessary to be able to even imagine the distant horizon, the longer view, such courage, hope, and faith were hard to find. In the 1970s, Earl C. Banfield, an individual I don't like a lot, but who had one interesting insight, well, he had more, but I object to a lot of his other writing. Edward C. Banfield observed that the most relevant indicator of social class is not education, income, employment, or housing, but the time horizon of the individual. Now, Banfield had his shortcomings, which are far too many to enumerate here, but I actually think he was on to something with this observation. I'm not entirely sure that social class was the right way to describe it, but he was pointing to the problem that we all face as individuals, as congregations, as whole nations when our time horizon is too short. It's not that we don't know enough. It's not that we don't have enough income, whether as individuals or as congregations. It's not that there isn't enough work to keep us employed or that we're not well sheltered for the moment. It's rather that we focus too much on that moment and don't look down the road a week, a month, a year, a decade, a generation, a century. We don't look down the road to see what we might yet become. I made a mournful, I really mean mournful declaration on Facebook recently that I think I now regret having shared, and yet, I observed that if I had my entire ministerial career to live over again, I would have devoted it to university chaplaincy rather than to parish ministry or working for the Unitarian Universalist Association. Some of my friends were shocked at this declaration. My daughters were undoubtedly surprised because I don't think either one of them could have imagined me as their university chaplain. But the thought just fell into my head that if that's how I had spent my ministerial career, instead of the way I did, that I might have had a more lasting impact for a longer period of time, and that more positive results might have accrued to my ministry. One person suggested maybe I was feeling sorry for myself. I wasn't. I just felt like if I knew then what I know now, I would have taken a different course of action because, as humble and modest as I am, I have a streak of hubris and arrogance that leads me to think that maybe I was put on the earth to make a difference, a positive difference, not only for myself, not only for my family, not only for my faith community, but for the whole world. How arrogant of me, and yet how commonly human, I think. We all want to see the lengthened shadow of who we are reflected in the goodness of the world that we leave behind. Now, that would be completely irrelevant to what I'm talking about today, except that someone had the unmitigated gall, the utter nerve to post the question, so why don't you do it now? I haven't answered. I don't know how. I'm 58 years old. My professional life is over. And yet, what my friend was doing was challenging me to take a longer view. She didn't say it this way, but what she was saying was, "You're stuck, buddy. Get over yourself. This is one day. There is still an entire future ahead of you. You have no idea how long it is, so stop sulking about it. Stop imagining what you might have done differently in your past and focus on where you plan to start moving today. And if you think you're too old to start that, if you think you are too old to begin a project that will be completed by others in another generation when you are no longer here to bask in the glory, well, get over yourself. It's time to look ahead." The problem with living for the present day is that we might live only for the present day, and that would be fine if it's our last. But most of us living in the present moment aren't living on our last day. We are living into the future. And so there is a challenge to us, a challenge to rejigger our time horizons, to recognize that to the extent that we don't look ahead, that we don't plan for the future and seek to live into our future, whatever it is, however short or long it may be, however big or small the contribution we make might prove to be, that we are challenged to look ahead and take a longer view. Otherwise, Edward Banfield is right. We've settled for too low an existence. Well, I'm not unique in this. I've shared an individual story about how I might have benefited from an extended time horizon, from imagining what I might be doing in a year, in a decade, 20 years from now. I don't know how much longer I have to make a difference for the world. And the same is true for every religious community in the world. We don't know how long we have. What we do know is that the religious landscape we live in is more puzzling and confusing and unpredictable than it has ever been. Have you stopped to think for a moment about how countercultural you are in 2018, sitting here on a Sunday morning, gathering in spiritual community, singing songs together, listening to some rambling fool from the prairies prattle on at you endlessly? Have you stopped to think of how countercultural that is? Growing up, my parents were admonished, "Do you know where your children are?" each night late on the television. Do you know where your friends are this morning? They may be in bed. They may be off at the mall. They may be busy with their friends at sports practice or some other pursuit, and none of those things are wrong. We each make our individual choices about how we will live. But presumably, you come here week after week after week because something at North Shore Unitarian Church draws you here, and that something makes your life fuller and more complete. It makes you feel calmer and more relaxed as you move into the week ahead. It makes you feel more confident in who you are as a human being. It reminds you that we're not in this alone, that we share the human project with other individuals, some of like minds, some very different, and that we can live together in community and all be the richer for knowing one another. I probably don't have to remind you about what's on CBC and CNN these days. And I wouldn't be so indecent as to tell you what's on Fox. But we live in a desperate time. Think about it for a moment. In the world all around us, things seem to be turning meaner. There is less concern for neighbors, let alone for society as a whole. And it's not just among our neighbors south of the border. We also see it in Western Europe. And there is a growing number of Canadian leaders who would mimic this hostile approach to being alive and leading in the world. There is good reason to worry about what's happening to society around us. And that's why what happens here, yes, here on Mathers Avenue, is it? Here, it matters what you do. It matters that you come together. It matters that you give one another courage And it matters profoundly that as a congregation, you focus yourselves on your future as a community. Imagine so far ahead that you will only be here in the sacred memory of those who follow. Imagine that whatever it is that happens at North Shore Unitarian Church makes a difference not just in North Vancouver and West Vancouver, not just in the greater Vancouver area, not just in British Columbia or Canada, but it makes a difference to the world. If you take the longer view, you will understand that everything great and good has begun somewhere, and it usually didn't attract a lot of attention to itself at the time. The great discoveries, the great advancements, the great contributions to human civilization did not look so great in their origins. But they generally happened among people who took the larger view, who, motivated by curiosity, engaged in scientific discovery, who, motivated by compassion, imagined a different kind of world in which to live, who, motivated by their imagination, created great works of art. And so Dodson was actually right in encouraging us to take courage, to be hopeful, to be optimistic, and to not take too short a view. It is a great challenge for us in this media age where everything happens instantaneously, where posts on social media are written and immediately forgotten, where communication seems so fast that we hardly even communicate at all, and where wisdom doesn't necessarily have the time to incubate and grow because we move on to the next thing too quickly. But if we can hold back, if we can adopt a longer view, if we can imagine that this project in this one congregation is worth pursuing, that this community is worth your efforts, your investment, your time, your hope, and your confidence. If you can just imagine that, and then imagine what a difference it would make if there was just one more of you, just one more thing for this community to contribute to. Just one. And make room for that oneness, then you will create the conditions to see the world with the longer view, and you will be part of the solution to the current relapse in North American society. Because I'm convinced it's a relapse. I am optimistic. I am hopeful. I am convinced that we can leave the world a better place than we found it, and that taking the longer view will be our way there. The challenge, of course, the challenge in taking a longer view is that we work on creating a map to get to we know where not. We don't know the destination, and we won't know it until we've arrived. And even then, most of us won't figure out that we've arrived. But we need to have confidence that there is a path worth following, a way to be in the world that's worth pursuing, and a hopeful future that awaits us. And so I return to where I might have ended the sermon. My advice to you is to cherish your past as a congregation, to savor your present moment, and enjoy the ambiguity of this year, and to live into your own best future. Because as long as there is one upright person, as long as that upright person is joined by someone who is compassionate, the contagion of this community might spread into the larger society. And therefore, hope is the thing that is left to us. We should all get up and wind the clock on a Sunday morning and Monday and Tuesday and every day that follows. And so, as E.B. White advised, hang on to your hat, hang on to your hope, and wind the clock, for tomorrow is another day.